was, alone in my office with the rapping of the rain on my window. A half-drank bottle of Dax Daniels hard liquor by my side. It's always been there for me. I've been working this case for a while now. The DA had been on my ass about it and I needed to give him results. How could a sequel have gone missing, up and vanished out of nowhere? As I pondered to myself, my dame of a secretary came in and handed me the latest witness reports. How did nobody remember this happening? Maybe it was the drink. I couldn't tell anymore. What could have happened here? There must have been something I'd missed. Or so I thought. I got a call about a lead that had the potential to bust this case wide open. But I suppose you must be confused right about now. How did I get here? And what exactly am I talking about? Well, to answer that, we're gonna have to go back to the beginning. Back to the start of it all. The mystery of what happened to the Megalobox sequel that everybody forgot. Also, the detective bit is over now. The world of Megalobox is one that shows two groups clearly divided from the very beginning, the haves and the have-nots, with that being made immediately evident simply by its design, with a huge and bustling future tech city that is surrounded by a barren wasteland, where corporations developed high-tech products and reap the profits of what they produce, while outside of their lavish metropolis, the people at the lowest end of society live out their lives in a desert. The only thing that connects these two antithetical worlds being the sport of megaloboxing. To summarise, imagine if you could strap an engine to your arms that make you punch harder and faster than any normal being could. That's megaloboxing for you, and if you're the kind of person that's sitting there thinking, I don't think that's very realistic at all, then you would be right. It isn't. Our story focuses on a person who is firmly in the category of the have-nots. That man being Joe, somebody who fights in illegal underground boxing matches where he's forced to take fixed fights against his will to escape a debt that he never even asked to take on. He, along with his coach Gansaku Nambu, who is just as slimy and unreliable as you would expect an underground boxing coach to be in a world like this. Or any world for that matter. Joe's frustration with his situation are made apparent throughout the first couple episodes, with both him and his coach knowing that he's far too good for this kind of life, but not having any other option to turn to, they grit their teeth and bear with it, literally putting their lives on the line just to survive. This deadly gamble is a theme that carries all the way through their story. But this all changes when an opportunity comes along that lights a fire under Joe and forces his hand to abandon his fake lifestyle and become the real deal that he knows he is. A tournament to determine the best megaloboxer, Megalonia, with the #1 ranked fighter being a man known as Yuri. Yuri is firmly in the other group of people in this world, and the very antithesis of Joe. He has corporate backing and the latest in megaloboxing tech, gear that is integrated directly into his body, the perfect fusion between man and machine, essentially designed to be at the top of the megaloboxing world. The two meet after a chance encounter where, at the peak of his frustration, Joe challenges Yuri to a real megaloboxing match, igniting that passion both within Joe and Yuri, only for it to be snuffed out when his corporate handler Yukiko calls him off. After Yuri comes and meets Joe in the ring, this lights that fire under him even more, and serves as Joe's motivation to compete, wanting to climb his way from being an unknown boxer who doesn't even have a name to compete under, having to forge his own ID just so that he can enter the tournament, to being a real champion, all in purpose of becoming the real deal that he knows he can be, and showing both him and Yuri, along with the rest of the world, that he is that genuine article. Season 1 thrives on hype, with Joe being forced to fight without any gear at all. He's the perennial underdog, with him having to prove himself at every turn. Literally going from a fraudulent fighter taking fixed matches all the way to challenging the embodiment of the system that's held him down in Yuri and becoming an inspirational figure that showed the world a dream they will never forget. But see, here's the thing about Megalobox. It shouldn't really exist. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for starters, the show was created as a tribute for the 50th anniversary of another series called Ashita no Joe, a more traditional boxing manga from the 70s, which focused on much more normal boxing and a much more conventional sports story. So how did we get to the diesel punk and dystopian world of Megalobox? Well, originally Megalobox was supposed to take place in the world of Ashita no Joe. However, after struggling to make it work, the team decided to do the only rational thing in this situation and make a whole new fucking setting with entirely new characters while retaining the themes of the original. Oh, and also, this was the first time that Yo Moriyama, the director, had done any directing. So when I say that this series shouldn't have existed, I mean two things. Firstly, the world and the setting shouldn't have even existed as this show is supposed to be a tribute, and secondly, against all odds, the show turned out to not just be a good tribute, but a great show in its own right. Even though it's so different from its source material, Megalobox still borrows a lot from what it's based on. The theme of Stray from Ashita no Joe are still captured in Megalobox, with Joe and Yuri constantly being compared to dogs, and Joe specifically being represented by a battle-scarred black hound in contrast to Yuri's white and pristine pedigree canine. This is only added to when we see their characters, with Joe having to fight at a severe disadvantage, often narrowly snatching victory from the claws of defeat, and often being abandoned by not only the world he lives in, but by the people around him. Another key element to Megalobox is family. It plays a huge role in Joe's success in Season 1, as whenever he fights with those close to him supporting his dream, he comes out on top, the conflict being between him and his adopted family being the main reason at times when Joe struggles the most. It's admittedly handled a bit heavy-handedly for my taste, but the message still comes through really clear. When you don't have material wealth and the whole world seems against you, it's having loved ones to rely on in your corner that gives you purpose to fight and allows you to be the best version of yourself. And for those of you that saw my video on Everything Everywhere All at Once, which you should go watch if you haven't, I promise that not every video I make will be about cherishing those close to you. And on that note, let's talk about the person that Joe cherishes most in this world, his coach, or father figure. Gansaku Nambu acts as Joe's boxing coach, and as I alluded to earlier, he is just as slimy as you would expect, with years of experience and tragedy stomping out his ability to dream of a brighter tomorrow. He's a good person at heart, but the reality of the world he lives in has made him into a person that will walk over everyone else just to survive, even betraying those closest to him just to keep going. He forces Joe into fixed fights, and even after Joe makes his way through the tournament and finally gets to live out his dreams of boxing in a real ring, Nambu nearly drags him back into the dark by agreeing to throw the biggest fight that Joe has had up to this point in order to escape from their debt. But this serves to be his defining moment in the show, Joe igniting the passion that he has for boxing inside of Nambu, who finally believes in Joe and even gives up his eyesight to allow Joe to live his dreams, sacrificing the one thing that he had left in order to let his fighter show the world who he is, but at the cost of never being able to see that for himself. Nambu is definitely one of the better things about Megalobox. His character growth may be wobbly at times, but his sacrifice is one of the most impactful moments in the whole show. That sacrifice allowing Joe to show the world his dream and be the inspirational figure that ignites that same level of passion for all the people that believed in him. But Nambu isn't the only person who's moved by Joe's dream. Among the countless people that see Joe and what he stands for, he picks up a young orphan boy named Sachio and his friends along the way. They play a larger part in the story later, but Sachio is often the force that keeps Joe going, being a much more literal representation of the people that Joe is inspiring during his career. Eventually, Sachio and Nambu and the people that Joe's dream sweeps up along the way become his family and serve as the driving force for Joe to go on to become the champion and defeat Yuri, a feat that he could never have accomplished alone. He lives out his dream and stands at the top of the world, achieving his goals through sheer force of will and from an overwhelming disadvantage. He shows the people that have nothing in this world that there is a brighter tomorrow, and in doing so imposes his dream onto those that believed in him and those that doubted him alike. Megalobox isn't perfect. It's not got the best animation, and while the themes of Megalobox are interesting, it never goes deep enough in its exploration of them to make it as good as it could have been. I still enjoy the first season, but after rewatching it earlier this month, I was left feeling odd due to the fact that I remember it being so much better. I don't know whether I just changed or if the show caught me at the right moment when I first watched it, but after finishing it, I almost didn't want to make this video. But nevertheless, I pressed on to the second season, and oh boy, did it make me remember just why I love this show so damn much. Right off the bat, Season 2 immediately captures the intrigue of the world of Megalobox, doing an excellent job showing us how Joe's dream inspired a generation, where we're shown a man who is so blinded by how brightly Joe was shining in the ring that he turns his back on the sport altogether. This is then immediately juxtaposed with our reintroduction to Joe 7 years later, and contrary to what you might expect, he isn't the bright and passionate dreamer that he once was. Instead being right back where he started, in unsanctioned fight pits, only this time he refuses to participate in that life as a fraud that he once escaped from. While we don't know what's happened to Joe in the time since we last saw him or how he's sunk back down to the level that we find him at, it's immediately obvious that he is not in a good place, both physically and mentally. One thing is clear though. Joe has very obviously been suffering, his design practically screaming at us that this is a man who has given up on life. From his longer and scruffier hair to an unkempt beard and battle scars shrouding his torso, it can't be made more obvious that Joe's life has taken a turn for the worse, and that the story we're about to see isn't going to be about Joe living the high life and enjoying his fame and success. And it's only reinforced when we learn about what Joe's been doing since his fight with Yuri. Firstly, we learn that Joe is addicted to shoddy painkillers to cope with the fights that he's been taking, and secondly, we learn that the person he arguably cared most about in this world, Nanbu, is dead. It isn't clear what happened to him at this point, but what is clear is that Joe hasn't been able to recover from it and move on, with that resentment towards his situation culminating in addiction. The portrayal of which is shockingly graphic and mature in its presentation, with Joe multiple times showing that he doesn't want to be addicted, and he knows that he should stop, but being unable to give them up due to the chemical dependency that they've created within him. Joe's lowest moment coming when he tries to throw the pills away on a grimy public bathroom floor right next to a toilet, only for him to come to about what he just did and desperately scramble to pick them back up. When watching both seasons back to back, it actually becomes painfully clear why Joe is in this situation in the first place. He doesn't have anybody, he doesn't have his family. All his loved ones that he held so dear are nowhere to be seen, and as a result, Joe's back to his lowest point. I mentioned earlier about how Joe is always at his weakest when he fights alone and lets his pride get in the way of his own ability, and Nomad shows this off with a tragic beauty that makes us miss the supporting characters that we got to know in Season 1, echoing how Joe must be feeling. We sympathize with Joe's isolation, and I would say we even suffer alongside it, knowing that what Joe needs right now are the people that care about him to remind him what matters and get his life back on track. Nambu's passing has clearly affected Joe way deeper than we could understand, with him hallucinating the ghost of his coach that blames him for his death and goads him into giving in to his addiction. Joe has no support structure anymore. He's alone with only his self-doubt and the ghosts of his past to keep him going, or keep him fighting until he dies. When we meet Joe again, he is truly a stray dog on its last legs. We do learn more about why Joe ended up alone again and specifically what happened, but before we can do that, Joe has a chance encounter with a man who will eventually come to lead him home. That man being Chief. Joe was a huge inspiration to many people after his championship victory against Yuri by showing them his dream, and Chief is probably the person that believed in Joe's dream most of all, using that passion to immigrate overseas in order to settle in a place where they could call home. Chief manages to show Joe just how much of an inspirational figure he was to people like him, and a dream which Chief aims to emulate by winning a local Megalobox tournament and securing the funding to buy the land that his group is occupying from a predatory landowner. Chief is honestly such a great character. Similar to Joe, he's been given nothing in this world and had to fight for everything that he has, even gambling his life to achieve those goals. But where Joe was mainly fighting out of a more selfish desire to live out his dream, Chief fights for almost entirely selfless desire to secure a place for his people to live, a place to call home. This is the thing that sets the two apart. Throughout the first season, we see everybody sacrifice themselves for Joe's dream, while Chief sacrifices himself to let the people closest to him live out theirs. And while Chief does manage to get Joe back on track, ditching his addiction and learning to live with the loss of a loved one, the most important lesson he imparts onto Joe is that he needs to go back home and reckon with his past. A past that is absolutely devastating for both Joe and us to see. And because of that, it's here that I would like to take a moment to say, please go and watch Megalobox Nomad. You don't need to watch the first season if you really don't want to, but while I've tried to avoid spoilers as much as possible, I won't be able to avoid it here. And while I'd like to think I'm pretty good at storytelling, it really wouldn't be the same as watching it unfold for yourself. So if you don't care about spoilers, then feel free to stay, but otherwise I would highly recommend going and watch it for yourself. Of course, only after liking the video and subscribing for more wacky uploads like this one. Alright, back to the video. After Joe returns home to find the gym he built with Nambu, Sachio, and the other members of his adopted family destroyed, we quickly learn that all these people he once loved so dearly hate him, not wanting to associate with him and openly demanding that he leave. It isn't immediately revealed why, but what we do know at this point is that Joe has clearly done something unforgivable. It isn't kept a mystery for long though, as we learn that after his championship match, Joe effectively retired from megaloboxing, only being coaxed back into the ring with the opportunity to fight Yuri's prized pupil in an exhibition match. But why would he take a match like this after retiring and being done with it all? Well, this is where we start to learn a little more about the circumstances surrounding Nambu's death, with him contracting a terminal illness that slowly kills him. His last wish being that he just wants to spend the moments that he has left with the family that he found along the way, and refusing to take a treatment that could prolong his life, but also prolong his suffering, which I think we can all agree he's had enough of. However, despite initially refusing to fight in order to spend time with Nambu, a mixture of Joe's selfish desire to prove himself and his inability to let Nambu go, Joe comes to him and asks to fight with him one last time, something that Nambu seemed to know was coming, and despite his initial protesting, Nambu agrees to let Joe fight. This all boils over when, just as Joe is about to go to the ring for his fight, Nambu's condition takes a turn for the worst and Joe decides to carry on with the fight. only to lose handedly to Yuri's pupil, both ending his dream and losing a man that was like a father to him all at the same time. Naturally, this makes the people around him resent Joe, especially Sachio, who saw Joe's actions as selfish and uncaring for Nambu's dying wish. Joe decides that the only way he can let everybody move on is to leave, taking on all of their hatred and disappearing from their lives altogether. This was Joe's biggest mistake, and while it's revealed that he actually fought with Nambu's blessing as he told him to take the fight no matter what, it was still rooted in a selfishness that has been festering in Joe's character all the way since the start of his journey, and despite his good intentions, Joe still paved his own path to hell, his journey back out of that hell being the crux of the later parts of Nomad. Megalobox Nomad is frankly even more impossible than its predecessor. Not only is it the sequel to a tribute that was almost entirely original in concept, but it also had the near insurmountable task of following up the highly acclaimed first season, and oh boy did it deliver, but not in the way that any of us really expected. Instead of choosing to expand in scope and try to recapture the magic of the original, Nomad chose to tell a much more grounded story about life after waking up from your dreams, about hope and redemption. And while Nomad pivots away even further from being a traditional boxing show, it does so with good cause, because it tells an important story and focuses on a setting that often gets neglected: the aftermath of success. And it's because of that pivot away from the convention that this series impresses me even more, as while it's far removed from the original, it still manages to capture the magic of season 1 and improve on it in almost every single way, as if we're watching the team behind it mature in parallel with Joe. The themes of Stray from the original are explored in more depth, with Joe having nowhere to call home, and the themes of what it means to dream are given the time they need to be properly explored, both through Joe and the people that he catches in his wake. Overall, the writing and presentation of this show is nothing but an improvement over the original, but one that's in the best kind of way, one that doesn't make me hate what came before it, but makes me love it more. After watching this series, I do appreciate season 1 a hell of a lot more for setting up the story that was to come. Nomad as a whole really sinks its teeth into the potential of Joe and the Megalobox world as a whole, and giving it the send-off that I never knew it or I needed. There are so many different things that I want to talk about, like how the corporate conspiracy elements that were shown in glimpses in the first season are expanded on, or how specifically the people that Joe inspired come into the story later on to aid Joe in his journey of redemption. I really want you to watch the show, if you couldn't tell, so I'm going to leave that for you to discover. And that only leaves one thing left for me to do. I gotta get back to that detective bit I was doing earlier as a prelude to the video and answer the question of why nobody saw this thing. So without further ado, I present to you the dark secret that completely busts this case wide open, the missing link to why this series was left in the dark so long. Ladies and gentlemen, it was exclusive to Funimation. Thank you. In all seriousness though, while it being exclusive to Funimation definitely made it more inaccessible for a lot of people, I personally think that another part of the issue was that people were satisfied with the first season. Even its ending, which was, well... Yeah, I don't know why I found this fulfilling either, but either way, it doesn't take away anything from the fact that I don't think people either wanted or more likely expected there to be a sequel, given that season 1 was, well, a tribute, and even though Megalobox was a smash success, The second season didn't seem to be on anybody's mind, especially 3 years after the first one wrapped up. Anecdotally, this was also true for me. I only caught the release of Nomad at the time because the very legal website that I was using to keep up with seasonal anime at the time just so happened to show it on the front page. I'd heard no reports from news outlets, and in the lead up to Nomad's release, nobody seemed to be talking about it or generating hype for it. And I suspect that a lot of people, even today, still might not know that there's a whole other side to Megalobox that they likely haven't even heard of. So I'll wrap this up by saying that if you thought Joe's story was over after Megalonia, oh boy are you wrong. It was only the beginning. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, I just wanted to say thank you for watching this, and also for those that watched my first video on Everything Everywhere All at Once, what the fuck? The reception was incredible. It got way more views than I was expecting, and I cannot thank you all enough for watching it and leaving the frankly amazingly nice and humbling words that you've all left me. I went into making it thinking that if I got 20 views I would be absolutely over the moon, so to see it get, you know, 100 times that is ridiculous. You are all amazing and I cannot thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. Anyway, this video has taken quite a long time to make, mainly because I also work a full-time job alongside this, so hopefully I can try and keep getting these out as consistently as possible, but we'll see. But anyway, yes, new videos coming. As always, this was a blast to make, and I really enjoyed dissecting this piece of, in my mind, forgotten media, and I hope that you did too. So once again, thank you all very much for watching, and if you did enjoy it, please do subscribe. There's more to come. Thanks, guys.